to another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast. And I've got an amazing guest today, Jeffrey Higgins. He is a landlord, real estate investor, also a podcast, and also a part of a men's group, and a lot of stuff going on in his world. But Jeff, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Thanks for having me on Strive for 25. I love the mission. I love the name. Let's get into it.
Cool, cool. So just for the listeners out there, a little bit of background on what you do, and also like how long have you been in the real estate game?
Yeah, man. I've been at the real estate thing for quite a while now. About 18 years ago, I bought my first rental property to hold, and been accumulating properties ever since. Lived in Massachusetts from 2000 and I guess the year 2000, including college, and until 2019. So from about 2006 to 2019, I accumulated rental properties there. Then I made the move down to Florida, and I've been accumulating rental properties down here. I still have my properties in Massachusetts that I manage remotely through a contractor. And in the last number of years, I've become heavily involved in a men's group, men's personal development, and first as a student and now more as a mentor. And it's been a great part of my life.
Can you share real quick the name of the group or where they could find it online?
Absolutely. It's called the Fraternity of Excellence. And yeah, it's thank God, thank goodness for real estate. It allows me to spend a lot of time, and it works very well together, complementary.
Cool. Definitely looking forward to digging deeper into the story, especially for the listeners out there. Um, because on this platform, we've broken the wealth equations down into three: the savings equation, the investment equation, and the results equation. It ends up being that simple. Again, the savings equation is very simple: income minus your expenses equals your savings, and that's important because to be able to invest, you have to have money saved. Investment equation, again, you buy an asset, get a rate of return over time, and then it becomes your total return. The results equation is all about how do you take yourself from where you are today to be able to build the change to get to where you want to go. Um, when you started out your journey in real estate, did you ever envision it working in the way that it has in terms of being able to buy yourself more time, the power of real estate, the compounding? Did you have any envision of what that was going to look like, when you first started investing 18 years ago?
Yes and no. My why behind the real estate was because I wanted to control my own time. I had a job for a little bit, and I always knew like a real job wasn't for me, and like a commute wasn't for me, and bosses weren't for me. I was a bad student in school, a really bad student. I love to read, but if you tell me what book to read, I don't want to read so much. I want to chart my own course. So no one in my family was into real estate investing. They were into investing. Fortunately, my father and especially my grandmother, they were stock investors, and they talked to me as a child, as an adult, and they taught me a lot. I'd like to tell a story. My grandmother took me took me to an OTB, an off-track betting, when I was like really young, like under 10 years old. And obviously that sounds pretty bad to take your kid to an off-track betting. They don't even exist anymore, but it used to be a place where people would go bet on horse races. So for a child to be there was unusual. But throughout my peripheral, I started to learn odds and probabilities and just looking at money and sizing up games. I could tell horse racing wasn't a great game. Stocks were a little in the ether for me. You couldn't touch them. But once I learned about real estate, it started to all make sense, more reliable, more predictable, less volatility. So I gravitated towards real estate. And then I love how you break down the equation, because it really is that simple. Throughout my early career, I was hyper focused on the first two parts of the equation, the saving and the investing, the saving and the investing. I'm big on living below my means because I don't really care for a big lifestyle, but I do care for freedom. So if I could save the money and then invest it to earn my own freedom, that made a lot of sense for me. Only in recent years have I really applied the third part of the equation, the results, becoming the person, and that has really completed the circle.
I love how you mentioned that, becoming the person. Can you dig a little bit? Let's to dig a little bit deeper on that. You mentioned living below your means. You're doing things automatically. Maybe you had these things were ingrained in you along the way. So you were doing these things, saving and investing, and seeing results, and then along the way, starting to see maybe a different way to look at things in terms of why or mission. What changed along the way to kind of give you that extra level of perspective?
Yeah, I said yes and no because when I envisioned the freedom that real estate might bring me, that's what I was working for, but I didn't realize like how good financially it would be. And now that I'm so far down the road, I tell people it's compensated me more than I deserve, perhaps. Like if I chose another industry, I'm a regular guy. I'm not like a super high tech guy. I would not have done as well in other industries. But real estate, in my opinion, offers an opportunity for a regular guy if they get their hands on and they really understand the class. There's just so much opportunity. So having a lot of success financially and with the real estate, but something was missing internally. I had a lot of worry, I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. And that wasn't something I was going to accomplish with another zero in the bank account. It just wasn't going to happen. I needed to look internally. So over the past number of years in working with my men's group and, finding my inner strength, some of the worry started to disappear. Some of the anxiety started to disappear. And I gained a lot more confidence in myself, belief in myself. I wasn't so attached or worried about losing it all. I was more comfortable with who I was.
You mentioned worried about losing it all, and that's something that I can definitely relate to in my own personal journey, especially with my industry. And we're a 100% commission type of industry that you don't know what's going to happen in a month, let alone 6 months or a year. So it's very challenging to make choices of how to live your life or plan things, and that's a whole different kind of story. But going down the path of freedom, and then you mentioned that, one extra zero wasn't going to solve that. From a general sense, that anxiety or stress, worried about losing things, where does that come from? Where does that start?
And for me, it was my default. I always just had a natural worry or anxiety. Maybe it had something to do with childhood. I lost my mother at a very early age. I was 6 years old. And I've always been a defensive minded person. So like, even as I approach investing, I think that served me because I've always been conservative. That's why it's actually led me to the asset class I chose. I operate in class C. So I feel like the demand is the safest there, because if you invest in luxury properties, you can make a lot of money. But I was always thinking, like, if there was a severe recession, the demand for high-end luxury goods is going to go down, but the demand for the lowest end of shelter is going to remain or even increase as people cut costs and look for a lower place. So it served me well because it led me to find a place that I could understand and resonate with as far as the asset class. But I mentioned fear of losing it all. The reason why I come back to that is because one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the past couple of years that I really had to work on internalizing was that self-belief that even if I lost it all, I would be okay. And I mean lost it all. If I lost my health, if I lost my ability to walk, I'd be okay. It's all upon us. And then once you can accept that, you can really enjoy what you have built. You're not so attached to it. So it's been an interesting last couple of years. I can say I sit here happier than I've ever been, calmer than I've ever been, and I'm probably a better operator as a result, because anxiety and worry don't really help us accomplish anything.
Well, I think it's important to talk about these things because, in the public eye, you hear these things and it's a big deal. Someone talks about anxiety, or this athlete is talking about his anxiety or stresses, and this, then, like, at the end of the day, the majority of people have some type of level of anxiety and stress, and good, bad, and different, whatever levels. It's just part of being human. And to put, a value on it, positive or negative, is just what we humans do as well. But it's just a biological response to how we operate as a human. So I think it's good to talk more about it in just everyday form. First off, but two, real estate. I mean, a lot of people, especially right now with the headlines, there's a lot of unknown in real estate, and people talking about housing crashes. And you mentioned it being, one of the safer places to be in. So before I go into that, I just want to say, I want to talk deeper about kind of how you started into the men's group, and then also kind of where you started in real estate years ago, kind of how it all started. So I don't want to forget that. But in that sense, why now or in the past was real estate safer in your perspective?
No, it's a good question, and I should clarify. So back to being a defensive minded person, I've never invested in real estate hoping for potential appreciation. Cash flow is number one to me. I'm an old school cash flow type investor. That attitude actually protects you from getting in overly risky situations, because when prices inflate, the cash flow gets worse. It's not as attractive. So I'm not as motivated to buy deals. But as prices fall, cash flow gets more attractive and I get more incentivized. So by following cash flow, it naturally protects me from making really bad deals and makes me only make deals that I'm okay to sit with, as long as the monthly yield is okay. The second part of the equation is put yourself in a market that is likely to appreciate. I mean, no one can predict the future, but if you look at demographic trends, one of the top two or three reasons I moved to Florida was because I saw demographic trends. You know, Florida's economy is growing. The Northeast economy is not growing. You know, Massachusetts is still strong. There were a number of reasons I moved down here, but every time I'd visit Florida, I could see economic activity. I could see building. I actually thought to myself, I was like, the only reason why this housing market isn't much, much higher is because of the lack of Fortune 500 employers in Sarasota, where I live, or even in Tampa. Like they have a downtown, but it's not skyscrapers really. But ever since work from home happened, that kind of alleviated itself. Now people can work. The location of the employers isn't quite as important. People got a taste of Florida, and now it's like we're it's getting crowded down here, to be honest.
Yeah. When you say Class C, how would you describe kind of the things that that you purchased, now and before along this journey? What does that actually mean in terms of the actual type of real estate?
So sometimes I'd say that the best place to find cash flow is in the worst neighborhood that you can tolerate living in. So I look in not a complete crime hotbed, not a war zone, because I show my own apartments and I don't want to feel unsafe doing that. However, the more luxury neighborhood you go to, the worse the cash flow generally. Obviously, exceptions apply. You can find a deal, whatever. But if you're buying at the market price, the lower end neighborhoods are going to have a better cash flow because less people are willing to get their hands dirty and manage it. So it all makes sense. So I live here in Sarasota. It's a very nice city in Florida. We have nicer neighborhoods and less nicer neighborhoods. I go to some of the less nicer ones, and that's where I buy. And the other end of the equation, though, is like you have to hold up your end of the deal. I know what I'm in for in the market. I know the product I'm providing. I know what it's like to be a lower income person, and I know what I valued because I've always been somewhat frugal. And the bottom line is the market that I serve, they're looking for a good deal on an apartment. Now, if I put granite countertops and stainless steel appliances in all of them, the price of the apartment is going to rise. And that's not what this market wants. Now, the market doesn't want you to have neglected property. If someone's plumbing has an issue, if someone's heating has an issue, cooling has an issue, it's my responsibility to take care of that immediately. And I take that very, very seriously. I hold up my end of the bargain as a landlord. But I'm also conscious not to overspend on cosmetics because then the price goes up and that's not what they want either.
That makes sense. From a standpoint of getting in the game, you know, what was the turning point that made you say, I'm going to take this leap and get into real estate, 18 years ago or before that? What was that place where you said, you know what, I'm going to do this?
So I was really excited about it in 2005 and 2006, and I was reading all the books, but again, no cash flow. I mean, the prices were crazy, and I just kind of had to sit on the sidelines, even though I was looking all the time. I was looking all the time. Because I was looking all the time, I was very aware when prices dropped. I was like, oh my goodness, this cash flow is so much better than what I was seeing the past couple of years. I'm going to get in. So my first long-term hold, which I still have today, was in 2008. And as we both know, and people listening know, prices continued to fall to 2011, but they were way off the highs of 2006, especially if you were searching for deals and making aggressively priced offers. So because I bought for cash flow, I was able to buy in 2008. The prices fell to 2011, but it didn't matter for me. As prices got better in terms of cash flow offered, I was able to buy some more. I mean, luckily looking back, I recognized the opportunity. I knew it was kind of crazy what was going on. And some of the buys I made in 2010 and 11, I would not aggressively finance things today like I did then. I took a lot of hard money loans. I took loans at 15% and 5 points at closing. I mean, basically loan sharks. But that's what you had to do to get the deals. And I recognized that worst case scenario, people still want a roof over their head. People are still going to pay rent. If I'm buying a 3-family at 15% and I'm paying 65,000 for it, but they're rent for 900 a unit, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to refinance that when I stabilize and get out of that loan and stuff. It's basically learning things and then acting once you have enough information. You're never going to have all the information, but once it looks good enough, you got to act.
So the first property you purchased, do you remember what the purchase price was?
$362,000.
Okay.
4-family.
And that was a 4-family. Okay.
Yeah.
And so like today, what would that ballpark value be?
That one I could probably get, I don't know, 700, 725, which is not the best deal I've ever done in my life by any means.
Yeah.
Those all happened 2010 to 2012. And then briefly coming out of COVID in like June to August 2020, I made some crazy acquisitions too.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I'll follow up. Like some of the best deals I did in 2010 and 11, I bought a 5 family for $185,000 that I still have today. That's probably worth 8 or 9. I bought a 3 family for 65,000 in Worcester. This is probably the worst neighborhood I was involved in. So I remember I bought the 3 family for 65,000, and a contractor working on it at the time told me, he's like, I cannot believe you paid that much for this house. I wouldn't have paid $20 for it. And I was like, that is, I'll never forget you said that, because he didn't sway me at all. He just didn't have the vision of what I knew was happening. For me, it was a can't miss. There was 3 units, and market rent at the time was $900 a month. Today it's $1,500 a month. I sold that property for $425 in 2021, and I 1031 exchanged it into 11 condos in Florida that I bought for like 1.15. So that original 65,000, I bird out of it, BRRR, for all of my money out within 6 months. And that original 65 seeded a 1.15 acquisition last year.
So when you do the math on that, like the dollar, because when you purchase the property for 65K,
Mhm.
you did a hard money loan.
Mhm.
How much money did you put down? Like 25%,
Yeah, I don't even remember.
something like that.
Let's call it 20 grand.
Yeah, 20 grand. So 20 grand into 1.5 million,
Yeah, and I mean,
essentially.
I still owe a lot of money on that, but the fact that it's positioned, those have appreciated pretty well too, and the cash flow is very nice. And
Yeah.
yeah, it took a long time. I mean, we're talking about long-term investing, but sticking with it and diligently managing it, it's I couldn't have done it in other asset classes.
Yeah. And if you kind of bring that back into today's world, obviously prices are a lot higher than they were back in, 10, 12, 15 years ago. If we were talking to somebody, right now that wanted to be able to get into the game, let's say it's somewhere in Florida that you are now in, any advice on somebody wanting to get into the game kind of from the ground level? What would
Sure.
be a good example?
I get this question constantly, and I have a bunch of answers to it. The first thing is deals never look good in the moment, really. Like, unless you're an incredible deal sourcer, they never look good in the moment. They do look good in hindsight. In hindsight, they look obvious, but in the moment, it's always difficult. If you talk to someone in 2009 or 10, they're thinking, wow, in 1985, the prices were so much better and stuff. And then 20 years from now, we might be saying, man, those 2023 prices, they were great because they were based off of 30-year mortgages. And now everything's based off of 40s. So things are dynamic and they change. Now, on the second hand, we are a little bit high right now. It is tricky. There was a chart released last week of rent growth versus price growth. And right now, price growth is a wide gap from rent growth. So that does make it a little bit risky. Like, either rent's got to come up or prices got to come down just to make that gap a little bit more normalized. So it is a difficult time to buy. I'm not going to lie about that. But think about me in 25 and 2006. You're looking at the market. It's a tough place to buy. So you look and you look and you look, and you wait until the cash flow is appropriate and you're ready to go because you're looking. And someday the cash flow will be appropriate. And it's not going to look like the best deal in the world, but it's going to look right. And you're just going to have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, getting in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting in the game allows you to have opportunities for the next one and the next one and the next one, but you can't get to the fourth one or the 10th one until you get in the first one. And personally, I see a lot of people that want to get into the game, and they have their sights set on certain things that maybe higher prices, things that are above what they probably should be getting into. And it's like, if you can find something for a lower end price point, just get in the game, and especially from a primary residence standpoint. I mean, somebody that's 25 years old, and I talked about this just this week. If someone gets in at 25 years old, maybe they buy it as a primary residence, and it's 3 or 5% down, buying that first house, living it for a couple of years, save up, buy the next one, and turn the old one to a rental. That's, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get in with a low amount of dollars out of pocket. And I just see a lot of people, I want this type of taste, this type of finishes. It's like, well, then you're gonna have to pay those prices and have that out of pocket and that payment. And sometimes you have to maybe look in a different area or a different price point type of house and just get in the game, especially if it's going to be a short-term thing. If it's a year or two, it doesn't need to be perfect.
So those condos I bought 11 of them in the 1031 exchange. Since then, I've bought 11 more, one by one, at $120,000 each. So my last acquisition was $120,000. So, I mean, singles will get you to the Hall of Fame. They really will. They're not sexy. And sometimes I look at the people doing big deals and I'm like, why am I not doing that? But then I'm like, you know what? My system works for me. I just make these little chip singles, and that's all it takes.
Yeah, and there's definitely, a lot of different ways you can skin a cat or get into the game or do real estate. Um, and to kind of give another example, again, you and I talked about this before. I'm going to say it again just because I think it's important to keep saying is that, like, you mentioned stocks, can't touch it in the ether. It is what it is. They go up and they go and they come down. In my opinion, and a whole nother kind of rabbit hole is that the stock market is manipulated by the big players, the institutions, the hedge funds. It's a whole different topic. But when you look at the dollars in, I mean, you put 10 grand into the stock market, you get a 10% return, which is great. That's $1,000. If you put 10 grand into purchasing your first home and you get an average appreciation of 3%, that's 3% on $300,000 purchase price. That's 9 grand. Like, you're literally like 9 timesing your appreciation in 1 year by using real estate. And so you map that out over 10, 20, 30 years. And if you scale in, that's why people love real estate. People that are into real estate, they love it. And there's many other reasons too.
So full disclosure is real estate's given me a lot of time. And over the past number of years, like 5 or 6 years of hard study, I've actually become a good stock trader after all of it. And I devote a lot of time to it. It's very, very difficult. It's much more difficult than real estate. There are some phenomenal materials out there. If you truly dedicate yourself to long-term study, you can become a trader, but it's like one of the hardest ways to make money. It really is.
And as I've kind of gotten further along on my journey, time, right? Like, I've got 3.5-year-old twin boys. So the last, 3 or 4 years is really going to change the way I look at time, especially. And it's like, I've dabbled in trading. It's like, if I take that same amount of time and applied it to something else, I can probably get a better return on my time in terms of actual dollars, whether it be doing things to build the business or a side hustle or learning this thing or that thing. I don't know. But if you love something, then you spend time on it. But from a standpoint of real estate, like, how much, like, right now, how much time do you spend a week just managing or reviewing or whatever?
It varies so wildly based on how many vacancies I have or acquisitions I've made. If I buy a couple of condos in a month or a couple of units, like a 3-family or something, and I have a few vacancies, that's going to take me a lot of time, running the contractors and making sure, fixing it up, and then doing the showings. In Florida, I do my own showings. My portfolio in Massachusetts is a dream because I developed some very good relationships. So it's basically just take a call and make a call. I have a guy there that shows the apartments for me. He's phenomenal. And that probably only takes me, I have a Zoom call with him once a week for about a half an hour and we text. That's it. Down here, it could be 15 hours one week. It could be like this week. It's probably been 30 minutes between texting people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you definitely mentioned, having more time, and now you're part of the men's group. When you talk about the mentorship part of it and people that are joining the group, why does somebody join the group? What's their purpose? What's their struggle? Or what's the piece of the puzzle that makes somebody want to be a part of the group?
That's a great question. And the answer varies from guy to guy greatly because we do cover a lot of topics. And basically, the answer is, what are you missing? What is your weakness? Some guys come in and their financial lives are a mess. And we have a finance board and I host calls on finance, and people grab me one-on-one and I get on a call with them and they lay out the budget for me and we work through their finances. Often someone has an issue with their marriage and they want to figure out exactly why it isn't as hot as it used to be. That is a big pain point for a lot of guys. They're in marriages where they're friendly with their wife, but it's not like when they were kids. So we do a lot of work there because there's a lot of mindsets guys have gone wrong with their relationships, especially in today's culture. We're told one thing by media and society, and they don't really acknowledge the way things really work. So my greatest pleasure really is seeing guys finally get it. The light bulb goes off. They start being leaders of themselves and their families, and everyone benefits as a result. Myself, for example, I now coach my daughter's teams pretty actively, and I devote a lot of time into it, and it's been so satisfying. And I get to influence not only her, but her teammates. And who knows what kind of people they have in their life when they go home. I don't know. I might be the only positive male role model they see, So I take that responsibility and role very seriously. I prepare and stuff. But before I joined the fraternity, I was just, dropping her off at practice and sitting on the sidelines and not getting involved. For whatever reason, it didn't click that should be me out there doing it. It's things like that. It's whatever your weakness is. You want to develop that weakness. We have a fatherhood Zoom every week that really I've seen people improve their parenting dramatically just by being conscious of it, by being accountable about it.
Kind of just dig a little bit deeper on the aspect of relationships and maybe media versus what we probably really should be thinking. I mean, what would you say is a really good example of something that people realize or learn that just shifts the way that they actually operate, day to day, week to week, to be able to make improvements?
It's a long topic, and I don't know how political you want me to get, because it's not really political, but just like media and society has had this a little undertone about. I'm sure you've heard the phrase toxic masculinity, and what that is very damaging, especially to young boys, because it's a subliminal messaging that something's wrong with you. And you shouldn't be told that your natural state, there's something wrong, there's something bad about being a man. So you have to really deprogram yourself from the messaging of society, which isn't in your best interest. People don't, some people know what they're doing, but some people just take it and regurgitate it. And I think it's very harmful to men. So what happens as a result is men repress their true selves. And when someone represses themselves and you're living inauthentically because you're holding parts of yourself back, it's a downward spiral. So a lot of guys are like scared to roar. They're really just scared to feel their own power and their own strength. And these aren't bad things. These are good things. Like when you acknowledge your own strength and your own responsibility in the world, you lead yourself, you take care of your health, you get stronger, and then you inspire other people because you do the right things. Like when you feel lazy because you want to come home and sit on the couch because you're tired from a long day, you look at yourself and you're like, no, I have this inner strength. I'm a man. I'm going to get up and I'm going to play with my children. I'm not going to let this day go to waste. So it's really, really good things that are misinterpreted by most of society today, unfortunately.
Gotcha. So from like a process standpoint, we have these internal things that we've repressed over time. And then there's a time and place, I guess, to be able to go through these processes and just acknowledge ourselves. Or how does this actually kind of come into real form on a day-to-day basis?
Different ways from different people, and it doesn't happen overnight. First you have to open your eyes and acknowledge what is going on. Why do I think the way I'm thinking? Why did I have those feelings? Why am I suppressing myself? We have a couple ways we do it in the fraternity. One of the founders wrote a book called 31 Days to Masculinity. It's a day-by-day process. And one of the days you do actually roar. You scream as loud as you can. Most people haven't done that. It's just like getting in touch with your natural self, like the feeling of you as a being. And once you get in touch with yourself through a process, you start to realize where you aren't being authentic, what you're not acknowledging, what you're pressing back. And once you can when you can get comfortable enough to express yourself authentically, life changes. Life gets a lot better. Hiding and not speaking your truth because you're afraid of other people's opinions, or you're just accepting what people tell you. I mean, we saw a lot of this in 2020, and the world isn't doing great because of it.
Would you say that when people come into the group, a certain way, that when they come out the group and put the work in, that they are marching towards becoming their best self and reaching certain levels of potential?
So the group is not magic. If you come in and you don't do any work, it's not going to work for you. But I have seen over and over the people that actually really commit themselves to learning, to working, to improving themselves. You wouldn't even believe it, the transformations. Physicality is something I didn't realize earlier in my life how important it was, because being able to really put your health as a priority and build your body up to become stronger, it's a feedback loop that comes. You start, your self-esteem improves. You look in the mirror and you have some definitive proof that you are putting in the work. You're getting it done. You're rising up where a lot of people aren't. And that makes you feel good. And then the world actually treats you differently. It was crazy. I used to be, a long time ago, I was overweight. And I quit drinking 8.5 years ago. This is way before the fraternity. And that was a positive decision on my life. And I dove into cardio and I lost a lot of weight and I got really skinny. I did an Ironman. And that was a great process. But then it hit me one day, like, I didn't want to be fat, but I don't want to be super skinny at all either. So then I started doing the weight training, and oh my goodness, I cannot believe how much, not only it's done for my body, but my mind. something got in touch, through my body, through the world. And now I'm living in a different plane. I shudder to think about if I never did it, I would have never understood it. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the thoughts going through my brain is like there's more likely a physiological explanation for some of these things, like the weight training stuff, like that's important, that it's building the extra muscle, which brings the extra oxygen to the muscles and extra flow, all these different things, which I'm not an expert, but all this stuff, there's a logical reason for this stuff. And I love talking about this because at the end of the day, when you spend time on something over and over and over, you're going to see results. Most people don't see results
It's
because they stop. They don't see results right away and they just stop.
it's happened too many times for me to see that, to think it's not correlated, because I spend a lot of time in this group and I see the guys that make the most improvement in their marriages, in their parenting, in their home life, in their happiness. And they also happen to be the guys that really started taking their fitness seriously. So it can't be a coincidence. It really, really matters.
100%. So you mentioned earlier about, being kind of an operator, calmer and collected, and running a business. Um, and going through a process like you're talking about, being part of this group. What does that mean from a business standpoint of what kind of effects does it have, and how does that kind of, what's your vision for the business as time goes on?
I think it does improve my decision making because it's not based out of fear, but really, more importantly, it's more fun to do business because I'm not worried. I used to really, really think about like, what if I make this deal and I lose all this money? And now it's just, is the decision the right decision? Can I accept the potential loss? Yes, I can. Okay, we're going to proceed, and I'm not going to worry about it because I did everything that I was supposed to do. So you can't control what you can't control, and trying to control that gets you into all sorts of trouble, and it's a miserable way to live. So um, it's helped me as an operator just by taking a lot of the fear out. I analyze the decisions probably more accurately because of that.
From a standpoint of the group, remember again, how long have you been part of the Fraternity of Excellence group?
2019.
Since 2019. And how many people are typically in the group at a time?
160 right now.
Okay. And then like, is that spread over geography, or is it all local, or how's that spread out?
Yeah, we got guys in New Zealand and England and Canada. We have a core group of guys in like the Carolinas, but we're all over the world. We meet up in the Carolinas. We met up in Florida last month. And we all did a Tough Mudder together. We actually played a flag football game, which was a ton of fun, but I don't know if it's a good idea for a 43-year-old to still be out there banging, but
Right.
it was a good weekend.
That's awesome. Because I think I saw some stuff on your Instagram talking about the summit and what you guys do in the fall, maybe. And where can people find you on Instagram?
Instagram, I'm at Jeff Higg. And I'm glad you brought up the summit, because the summit was an idea I had and I pitched it to the other owners, and they loved the idea because I'm sure a lot of people are listening right now and they're like, what is this? Like an online men's community? People don't even know these things exist. I think 5 to 10 years from now, it's going to be a lot more common for people to deliberately find people they want to associate with, because a lot of men make friends by default. Whoever's in their proximity becomes their friend. But we all know we're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So isn't that a really important decision that you shouldn't leave to proximity? I think you should seek it out. So the Mission of Excellence is a conference that we're putting on. We're going to have 10 speakers. It's going to be on October 14th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Speakers on parenting, being a better father, fitness, of course, money, all sorts of comprehensive for males. And the face-to-face is super important. Like, I was a seminar junkie in the 2000s, a lot of real estate seminars, but everyone I went to, I got tremendous value out. Like, even the worst ones, I got one thing that made it worth 3 or 4 times whatever time or money I put into it. And the best ones completely changed my life. So I'm a big believer in seminars for growth, and I'm a huge believer in the mission of the fraternity. So Mission of Excellence in Charlotte in October, I'm really excited about.
So the group as a whole, right? So people are kind of spread out in certain respects. So like on a weekly cadence or a monthly cadence or a quarterly cadence, like what happens along the way that people are going to be engaged in? Is it Zoom calls? Is it one-on-ones? How's this set up?
All the above. Yeah, we have a Slack that is very active, and there's different channels in the Slack, finance, parenting, fitness, all that stuff. So there's conversation constantly. I have a question. Like this morning, some guy's like, "Oh, I'm just trying the carnivore diet. What supplements can I take?" So I called my friend who's a heart surgeon and also a carnivore. I said, "Hey, what supplements are you taking? You're on carnivore." And he's like, "Man, you don't even need any supplements. All you need is steak." So I got him. This guy is like, "I'm starting this diet." And because he messaged it, I was able to reach out to a heart surgeon and get him the answer he was looking for. That's every day in the Slack. We have 6 Zooms a week on different topics. 2 of them are just roundtables for the whole fraternity, but then fatherhood Zoom, sex and relationship Zoom, debt domination Zoom, which was the last financial channel. So we're in close contact there. And then the local guys are constantly meeting up, especially the guys in the Carolinas. They're going out for barbecues all the time, and a lot of interaction.
That's awesome. So kind of bring it focused on real estate. Would you say that the people, because what's going through my brain talking about this, like finding people with a like mindset,
Mhm.
seeking them out, like you mentioned, I think is so important. And me personally, just, getting on social media in the last 12 months, opened my eyes as well to this whole kind of mindset. Oh, shit. I don't have to be looking at people nearby geography. I could be talking, meeting good people, 1,000 miles away or whatever. But it's a lot of fun when you're around a lot of people that are thinking on the same plane, right?
Absolutely, especially if it's a plane of growth. We don't always agree on everything. It's not all people who think the same by any means. It's not an echo chamber, but except when it comes to personal responsibility, we're in control of our lives. Whatever is going on in our life, it's beautiful. Like it's under our control to fix it. We always have something we can do to improve our own lives. So that is the one echo chamber, is that personal responsibility. But otherwise, the methods to get there, people have different methods, and we share those and we break them down, and maybe we take parts from each person's, and it really works. It's an amazing thing.
From a financial and real estate standpoint, have you seen people in the group, take steps and strides and get into real estate in the last 3 or 4 years since you've been in the group, and just seen certain types of growth in that way?
I keep forgetting that, and I probably should mention it on this show. Yes, there is a real estate channel that I answer every single post to, and people constantly DM me for advice on real estate, and we get on calls and one-on-one. Several people have bought properties. I hope and I think that I influenced them doing that. They're all doing pretty well with them so far. Every deal that I've seen, I think I've been able to talk them out of the bad ones and maybe tell them to go for the good ones. We talk about money a lot. Now, people are from all over the place. We have some very successful guys, some really successful business guys, but we also have some guys that are really not doing so well. And we had a challenge a few months ago specifically for people with personal debt, credit card debt, on we're all going to work together and make a plan to get this consumer debt out of your life. So we meet you where you are. And it's very satisfying for me, because I like talking about real estate, and I'll definitely walk you through your deal. But I really like talking to the guy who's like underwater, does not know how to get out of his credit card debt. Like, let's make a plan, let's make a budget. And then when they get out of it and they're on their feet, nothing better.
That's awesome. From a strategy standpoint, if you've got money coming in, money going out, something has to change to be able to get different results. So what are you seeing people do as an example to be able to kind of knock that out? Is it cutting spending? Is it other things? Like what are some of the things that people are doing to try to be able to attack that?
Really depends on the guy. Some people do have side hustles, and we encourage them to, monetize those better. Oftentimes, especially some of the guys who are struggling, it does come down to a budgeting thing. It comes down to watching where you're spending your money, just being more conscious of it. So many people are unconscious. They're sleepwalking through stuff. So when you really shine a light on exactly where the money is going, and make some sense of it, it kind of surprises me, because this stuff came naturally to me. And then I see people it doesn't come naturally to. So you walk them through it, and you explain, how do you budget for your expenses, and where do you allocate this money, and why does it run out? Oh, because of this leak over here. That looks pretty obvious to me, but it wasn't obvious to them. So we work with them.
So you've got the men's group, the real estate, and a podcast that I think you said you're 10 weeks in. And can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I got the Efficient Victory podcast. I'm still trying to figure out my content way online. I was very anonymous for a long time for a number of reasons. Some of them were I just didn't know what to do, and some of it was fear-based, hiding a little bit. It's a litigious society, and I'm a property owner, so I was like, I should keep a low profile. But the guys in the fraternity mentioned, your words and your story can inspire men. Like, you shouldn't be hiding. You should be sharing that. after a few years of hearing that, I said, you know what, you're right. So started the Efficient Victory podcast. Some of them are about men's issues. Some of them are specifically landlording issues. And we're hitting it. I'm enjoying it, and we'll see where it goes. I think I'm getting better. So it's
Yeah, yeah,
humbling.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that like, as we talked about earlier this week, is like I never thought I'd be on doing a podcast. The thought never crossed my brain. And then you do something, you do something, you do something, and all of a sudden, like, okay, it just clicks. Like, okay, I'm gonna try this. And so, like, if you take that kind of mindset, like, okay, you're doing this podcast, you don't know where it's gonna go in 2 or 5 years. I mean, what type of impact or message or whatnot would you want to be able to have with the podcast and also social media?
So it's funny, like the podcast, there is no downside really. I mean, I have the time, so why not do it? The only downside for me was looking stupid on camera. And then once I realized that doesn't matter at all, because guess what? If you saw me look stupid on camera, you just watched my video. So, but my message, I have a few messages. As far as real estate's concerned, I want regular people to know it's probably the best asset class for you. You know, the illiquidity of real estate is such a blessing for the regular person because the liquidity of stocks, people make mistakes. Like the fact that you can press a button and get out of your position, that sounds like an advantage. It's a disadvantage. To sell a piece of real estate, you need to hire a title company and usually get a lawyer and list it and find a buyer. And it's hard to panic sell real estate. So people make less mistakes, less decisions, less mistakes. That's one. Two, the long-term mortgage pay down is automatic savings. Like you can't spend your principal pay down on your mortgage. So you're automatically booking that for the future. That is magic for most people because lifestyle creep's a real thing. If that money's in your account, even if you intend not to spend it, decent chance it gets spent. But if it's a mortgage pay down, it's not getting spent. So my message is real estate's for the regular guy. Like if you're a tradesman, if you're a middle manager and you buy 2 houses over the course of your 30-year career, that might change your entire retirement, your entire legacy.
That's so true. That's so true. And I love how you explain the less decisions, less mistakes. You can't panic sell real estate. And I think, I can relate to that personally because I'm a very, very impatient person. So, I made mistakes trading along the way just by pure impatience. So I stopped doing it because I don't have fun doing it and it's not worth my time. But that's a big reason for it. Like, I think that's one of the reasons I love real estate is yeah, I can't panic sell. So, um, and the whole podcasting thing, we had a gentleman who's I think 21 years old that hasn't aired yet at this moment in time. John Mendez, Walk to Wealth podcast, and talking about his journey in podcasting. And he kind of gave this analogy of like, okay, could you imagine going up to some super important entrepreneur business person and asking them to go to coffee and like I'm going to pick your brain versus, hey, I have a podcast. We're highlighting individuals in your industry and showing, sharing their stories out there. Would you have interest in jumping on the podcast? It's a different conversation to have with that person whose time is limited for talking about a podcast versus, can I pick your brain at coffee?
It is really amazing because I've always been averse to selling. Like I don't like to reach out and ask people for stuff. And I was shocked. Like, want to be on my podcast? They're happy because you're doing the work, you're providing a service. You've done the legwork to put it online, and you're just giving them a platform. So it's a very easy yes. People are happy to do it.
Yeah, and me personally, I haven't really spent any time or energy trying to get on a lot of the podcasts. Just my own choice, but something after really having that conversation, I'm like, oh shoot, I need to be doing a better job of really getting out there and sharing messages and whatnot. But that's for a different conversation.
It's harder to get on them than to get people on them.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. From a real estate standpoint, when you map out the next 2 to 4 years, we're in this uncertain time. There's talks of a housing crash, talks of, recessions, and who the hell knows what's going to happen. I think also, the residential market is in probably a different standpoint than the commercial real estate market. That's a whole different, but what type of goals do you have for your business? I know you mentioned, scaling up the next 11 units at some point along the way, but what's your goal?
So when I was a kid, I played a lot of hockey, and my hockey coaches said, if you carry the puck in the zone, you have to read and react, meaning you take what the defense gives you. And that's how I look at the real estate market, especially where I am right now. Like I'm in a good spot. I pretty much got all I need, but I do like to play the game. So if the defense offers me attractive opportunities, I will take them. But if they don't, I'm good. So I optimize for lifestyle at this point. Like if you gave me a great deal that was an hour and a half away from me, or a good deal that was 15 minutes from my house, I'm going to take the good deal 15 minutes from my house. I'm in a different spot right now. Now, if I was younger, I'd be far more aggressive and I'd be looking for them. But I do think it's very likely that I will acquire a lot more real estate. It's not the time right now for me, just because the cash flow of the deals I look at in Sarasota are not super attractive. I think they'll get more attractive at some point. And then also like personal, I bought a lot of units last year. I wasn't even planning on it. So I kind of need to digest them in my personal finance just to get my risk profile where I want it to be aggressive again. So it's a combination of when I have the financing lined up again, which I could get it lined up right now. I just have to work a little bit harder, and attractive deals. And then the other thing is, so now I have these 22 condo. I never planned on owning condo units. That's another story. But I own 22 condo units in this 80 unit property. Now the word is out that like I will buy them if you sell them to me at the right price. So I should get some decent deal flow there over the years.
So I do apologize. I forgot to ask this question. Getting into the men's group, Fraternity of Excellence. How did you do that? And what was what got you over the edge to be able to join that group in the first place?
Sure. Yeah, I was reading online. There were a couple things I wanted to improve. I was actually looking to improve my marriage a little bit. Me and my wife, we've had a great relationship and a great marriage, and we've loved each other a lot. But before I was acknowledging my true inner strength, we kind of were more best friends than, lovers and like leader and co-captain rather. So I was looking for how to get the relationship a little bit better to what I wanted. And there was a guy writing some things that I resonated with. His name is Zach Small, and he was a co-founder of Fraternity of Excellence. His Twitter account's pretty active. He writes some Substacks. And every time I read what he wrote, I was like, yeah, no, this guy gets it. This guy gets it. And he's authentic. And I agree with his principles. So, I contacted him actually for a coaching call, and I talked to him, and he's like, you got to join the group. And I was like, what is this? An online group? Same thing. Like when you don't know, you don't know. So I resisted for a little bit, and I finally jumped in, and I'm glad I did. Really glad I did. It changed my life.
If somebody had interest in learning more about the group, can they reach out to you directly?
Please reach out to me directly. But we're actually in the process of creating a free Facebook group to kind of give you a taste of what goes on behind the walls. I'm really hoping that we will grow, because I know how good of a tool it is. I know how much it can improve men's life. So I want to get the word out there more. That's why we're doing the conference. And now that's why we're creating this free group. So you get a taste of what goes on in the paid group. The paid group is $99 a month. It's actually the best value in the entire world of anything I know about, but there is still some hesitancy if you don't know enough about the group. So you can join the free Facebook group at Path to Excellence, Path to Excellence. We're actually starting the Path to Excellence podcast next week. So a second podcast on my calendar, but that's co-hosted with some other people. And or you could take my word of advice and just jump right into the Fraternity of Excellence, click join now, and I'll take care of you inside.
Cool. Any other words? I know we're coming up on time here. The aspiring entrepreneur that's trying to find their vision, make their dream and vision a reality. What advice would you have to that person, that's trying to operate in this environment?
Yeah, I have some really cliche advice for them. Don't give up. Like everything is a hurdle, and when you're trying to open these doors and it's not the right door, it's frustrating, and you got to keep on opening doors. And it happens over and over again. Like whether it's finding the right personal trainer or finding the right girl or finding the right financing, you might knock on 8 doors and the 9th one has the answer. That's happened to me over and over again. So keep going. Like if you're looking for deals and you're not finding any deals, well, you're going to have to lean into your patience right now, or you're going to have to find a new method. Maybe you mail to probate leads, or maybe you talk to every single wholesaler and tell them what you're doing, or ask them what you can do for them. But there's opportunity out there. Like people that are really committed to hustling and finding the answer, they're finding the answer. It's not easy, but just keep at it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to continuing to stay in touch and following your journey on Instagram and Twitter. And thanks again for making time, and looking forward to catching up down the road and seeing a lot more stuff from the group. But thanks again, Jeff.
Anytime, Joel. My pleasure.
All right. Take care. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast.